Awesome. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Corey Redderkop. I'm the Director of Policy and Stakeholder Relations at the Board of Trade here. I'm going to pass it over to our President and CEO, Paul Holden. And Paul, maybe you want to kick us off on the session today.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks very much, Corey. And welcome, everybody, to today's session. My name is Paul Holden. I'm the President and CEO of the Burnaby Board of Trade. And as I say, welcome to the BC Business Recovery Grant Explained session today. First of all, I'd like to start the event by acknowledging that it's being held today on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam and Squamish nations. I'd also like, as I always do at this point, to acknowledge and thank the Burnaby Board of Trade's annual partners. We have a tremendous group of organisations that work with us and support our programs throughout the year. And you can see that on the slide here right now. We have at the platinum level, the Burnaby Now and the BCIT School of Business and Media. At the gold partnership level, we have Fortis BC, Pacific Blue Cross, SFU, Electronic Arts, ABC Recycling and Douglas College. And at the silver partnership level, we have Alexander College, Trans Mountain, Appia Development, Port of Vancouver, and Scotiabank. So normally we'd have a big round of applause for them right now, but we'll do that virtually and thank them very much for their kind and generous support throughout the year. So today's event is another part of our series of events that we've been doing a lot in recent times, helping to share with the business community a lot of the supports and resources that are out there for business during what's obviously has been and continues to be a very challenging time. So today we're delighted to have some representatives of the provincial government who are here to present on the BC Small and Medium-Sized Business Recovery Grant. And also have my colleague, Corey Redderkop, who's our Director of Policy and Stakeholder Relations. And he'll be sharing some details near the end of the session today on some other support programs you might want to keep an eye out for and that you should be aware of, including the brand new e-commerce grant. For those of you, and I know I see a few people online today who perhaps might be new to us here at the Burnaby Board of Trade. So just a few words on who we are as an organisation. We are the Chamber of Commerce for the City of Burnaby, as well as the Economic Development Office for the city. In our role as a Chamber of Commerce, as a membership organisation, we see our role and we describe it as being a 3C organisation, which is a catalyst for economic development, which is being a critical partner for the business community here in the city, providing resources and supports to help the business community grow and thrive, which in turn creates a strong and healthy community for us all to operate within. So catalyst for economic development is a key part of our role here in the city. The second C is convener, and this is a really important part of what we do, which is bringing together the business community and political leaders here in Burnaby to all work together for the greater good. We see far too often in today's world that people are divided and doing their own things in their own corners. But we very firmly believe that the Burnaby Board of Trade is a place where we can all come together, work together to support each other. Because I think everybody realizes that we're far, far stronger when we work together than when we try to do things on our own. So our role as a convener here in Burnaby is unique and is critical. And finally, being a champion for business. Business needs a voice. Business has needed a voice forever, but in these recent times, having an organisation that's out there advocating on behalf of business has perhaps never been more important. And that's a key role that we play, working with government, making sure that at all levels of government, businesses have the support and the resources that they need. It's a role that we take very, very seriously. It's a role that we put a great deal of effort into. And it's a role where the outcomes can be a session like today, where business the government has created a resource for business, and we're here to support that and make sure businesses know how to gain that support. So today we're very pleased to be joined by Morningstar Pinto and John Cruz. Morningstar is a Director of Outreach and Engagement with the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation. She's currently supporting Stronger BC projects for the ministry and working to amplify and promote the Small and Medium-Sized Business Recovery Grant. And John is a CPA, CGA and Manager of Finance and Administration with the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation. And he's currently supporting Stronger BC and leading the adjudication team for Small and Medium-Sized Business Recovery Grant Programme. Just a reminder to everybody that the session today is being recorded and will be shared with some of our members who were unable to join us today. And after the presentation from John and Morningstar, we'll be looking to get some questions and discussion going. So please type your questions into the Q&A box or the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll work through as many of those as we can in the time we have available. And with that, I'm going to pass over now to Morningstar and John, who are going to present for a short while. And then, as I mentioned, questions at the end. And then Corey's going to step back in and provide some other information on other programs. So Morningstar, John, over to you.
Thanks, Paul. And hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. John and I have been doing a bit of a road show throughout British Columbia, thanks to the virtual reality we're living in now. And yeah, thanks for the great introduction. I'm going to start sharing my screen just so that we have a little presentation for you. So give me 1 second here. We'll pop that up there. So John and I are just going to roll right into this, I think. John, the one thing they missed with your introduction is you're also an all-around fun guy. I think we should start putting that into your bio. Well, don't let an accountant fool you, anybody.
Oh my gosh. We'll see. Okay, we'll try not to disappoint.
Okay, so as long as everybody can see my screen, I'm going to jump right into it. So a little bit about the agenda. We're going to talk a bit about the program and available funding. Then we're going to talk about the two-step process. We'll give you some tips for success. We'll give you some options for the recovery plan. And then we'll wrap it up and we'll go on with a Q&A, which I think is going to be one of the most valuable parts of this whole session with you today. So a little bit about the program, just to get everybody on the same page. It provides financial assistance to businesses that have been drastically impacted by COVID-19. So really the intent here is to help businesses stabilize and adapt their operations and sustain their employees. So eligible businesses can receive up to $30,000 in funding with an additional $15,000 for tourism businesses. So essentially, when the program started, it was a little bit tricky. We had quite a few businesses and stakeholders ask us to simplify the application process and to streamline the criteria to make it easier for businesses to apply. So we've done that. We've made it easier, and now John and I are rolling through just singing the praises of how easy it is. So let's talk a little bit about available funding. This chart gives you an overview of what the base amount and the tourism amounts are for the grant. So the base amount is on the left in blue. So this looks at your pre-COVID annual revenue and how much you would be eligible for. And then if you are a tourism business, that's based on the number of pre-COVID BC residents employed. So you can get that tourism top up. So let's see a little bit about the two-step process. The program is delivered by us, but we're also working with Small Business BC, as you'll see later on in this. So essentially what we're asking businesses to do is go to this website up here, the gov.bc.ca Business Recovery Grant, to find out what the eligibility criteria are and to see what you need to apply. This is going to help you in the long run. You're going to be able to see all of the documents that you need to make sure that when you do apply, it's smooth and fast. So once you've taken a look and you've deemed yourself, or you've determined that you're likely eligible for this, then we encourage you to start the application. So that's an online application. And then after applying, we do have a team that's reviewing your application for eligibility. And they will reach out if they have any questions or they need more information. And then the second step of this is once your eligibility is confirmed, you move to completing a recovery plan. So John, I'm gonna pass it over to you to talk a little bit about the tips for success and some of the eligibility criteria.
Sure, thanks, Morningstar. Do you mind operating the slide?
I don't mind at all.
Great, thanks. So thanks everyone. This is the part of the call where I take you from the high with Morningstar down to the low with accountants. As Paul mentioned, I am an accountant by trade, so don't hold it against me. But what we'll talk about is some of the things that we're seeing so far as we've learned over the past 4 or 5 months, and particularly what we learned in the first 3 months, and the minister really took to heart, and that's why we implemented some changes. So some of the challenges we're still seeing in terms of adjudicating applications are making sure we're conveying the information we need, because this is a grant program and it still requires some of the rigor required for overseeing the public funds. And so information we need really follows through with the changes that the minister has announced just leading up to Christmas. So I'm going to go off script here, Morningstar, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Just highlighting some of the changes that were announced leading up to Christmas, and sort of clearing up some of the confusion that many folks have about the process. Up to December, folks that had already applied do not need to apply again. We are still looking at all your applications and making sure that they fit within the new criteria. And that's what I'll speak to now, is some of the new criteria. So the minister announced, like I said, leading up to Christmas, was that the original requirement for businesses to be in operation was 3 years. It is now 18 months. So as of the date of your application, 18 months back, if you apply today, we're probably looking at sometime in August 2019. So you would have to be in operations. I did notice a question in the Q&A. Sorry to be peeking in there too early, but somebody asked if you were incorporated in July 2019. You would be eligible if you began operations in August 2019. Next change in our program was allowing for businesses that have been temporarily closed or seasonal. They're now eligible. And we also lifted the employee requirement. So businesses like sole proprietorships or partnerships, let's take it, for example, mom and pop shops who don't have employees, they're also eligible now, as long as they meet our criteria. We removed some of the onerous requirements related to remittance accounts like GST and PST, because it really didn't impact our grant program and how we adjudicate for it. And also, one of the big changes that the minister announced was trying to make this grant program as inclusive as possible. And so adjusting the revenue loss criteria. So as Morningstar alluded to earlier, we're targeting the businesses that are most gravely impacted by COVID. So the revenue loss criteria for March or April compared to previous year is still 70%. However, from May onwards, as long as they can demonstrate, business can demonstrate that they had revenue loss of 30%, and for any of the months in between, then they would be eligible for that criteria. Moving back, I just missed a note here for seasonal tourism. We adjudicate files based on specific business cycle. So if you're a seasonal business, we will follow wherever the business cycle takes us, as opposed to a typical business where the revenue streams are sort of more consistent. One other announcement that was made was the grant funds and what they can be used for, and when they can, what period they can be used for. So the minister announced that any funds that had been incurred, any expenses that had been incurred up to the date of the announcement of the program, which was September 17th, can be retroactively applied for the against the grant funds. So what we recognize is that folks couldn't wait for us to get our stuff together, and they started to either pivot their business or find other revenue streams or decide on what they were going to do to recover. And so what we're saying is that if you apply and you're eligible, those grant funds can go towards those costs that have already been incurred. Another change was allowing for folks to use their grant funds to pay some of the overhead, like rent and property taxes, utilities. So opening that up for folks. And on the tourism side, we, as you know, the Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture announced an influx of funding for our program, and they've increased our tourism top-up, which is above the base grant of up to $30,000. And Morningstar will speak to that in a little bit. But the tourism top-up has been increased to a maximum of $15,000. And what we have also done is we've settled on a definition for tourism that's a little bit more broad and trust-based. So we've adopted the StatsCan definition of tourism, which is basically any business that supports tourists, regardless of whether they're international, interprovincial, or within our province. Those are tourism businesses. So really making it broad and trust-based, so folks that apply and they feel that their tourism business is a significant part of their business, then they can just say, yes, I'm tourism. The next part I wanted to get into really quick was about recovery plan options. Yes, thanks, Morningstar. So there are 3 options for folks that want to take advantage of. We have partnered with Small Business BC. And so once you're deemed eligible, you can be matched with a service provider through Small Business BC, and they'll help develop your recovery plan. And they're up to additional $2,000, and that $2,000 is not part of the grant. So the grant, if you qualify for the full amount of the grant with the tourism top up, that's about $45,000, and this $2,000 is above that amount. Another option you have is to bring along your own service provider. So if you have an accountant or a bookkeeper or lawyer, and I keep forgetting the last one. What's the last one again? Start. Oh yes, the financial planners. Don't worry about those guys. Stick with your accountant. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. If you do want to bring your own service provider, like a lawyer that's in good standing, a CPA that's in good standing, or a certified bookkeeper or certified financial planner, then they can help provide support in developing your recovery plan. However, and they'll also be eligible for that $2,000. Now, one thing I wanted to mention is that originally our recovery plan template was about 25 pages, and we heard the feedback that it was just too onerous, it was too much effort and just not worth the time. And people are holding on, barely holding on, and having to spend time on a document like that, which is basically recreating a business development plan, is just, you know, not good use of time. So the recovery template now is about 2 pages. I actually think it's about 1.5 pages, because the last 2 pages are a declaration page and a signing page. So really it's 1.5 pages where all we ask is identify the recovery plan item that you want to undertake, the time it will take to implement it, and the cost. And the lens that we apply is it reasonable and is it implementable? And if it supports your recovery and it supports your community, we're all for the recovery plan, investing in those companies. I think that's everything, Morningstar.
Yeah. No,
okay.
I think that's good. Just for everybody on the line, we're used to having casual conversations, and we're not used to driving a PowerPoint at the same time. So
you guys are doing
we're
great
feeling
so far,
the
though.
pressure.
I was like looking at the PowerPoint, like, did I say that? I don't know if I said that.
No, you did. And I think a big part of this too is and John, we've been talking a little bit about this. I think there are going to be businesses who really need to sit and take the time to work with a service professional or like a professional service provider to work through the process and to really take a look at where they want to go. And this gives the opportunity for that sober thought of like, okay, what exactly are we doing? We've been moving so quickly. We're just trying to stay afloat. We need to stop and think. But there are businesses out there who are like, we know exactly what we want to do. We know exactly how we want to spend the money, or we have already spent the money and we want to get paid back for it. And so I think the great thing about this is those businesses can develop that recovery plan on their own. So if you're a business or a business who knows exactly what they want to do and they are ready to fill out that recovery plan, it just means they can skip that step. They can jump in the HOV lane and they can go right away, which is great. It gives that option. I think both of them are very, very useful, right? If you know what you want to do, let's help you do it. If you need some time to think about it, we're here to help you think about it.
Absolutely, Morningstar. I agree. I think it's nice to have the access to a service provider that can help look not just the next 6 months, but maybe the next 1.5 years, 2 years, where what's your long-term viability looking like, and what are some other options that can be done, right? We've seen a lot of good plans come in already, and where people have pivoted to something that they never thought they could, and just having that access to someone that says, you could do this if you tweak this kind of thing. And I won't go into the example until we get into the calls, but there's some really great examples that we've seen so far.
Yeah, for sure. And so a couple of sample recovery plan actions on the screen here for you. This is just a few tiny things. You know, again, I think when John says, you know, is it reasonable? Is it actionable? Is it going to help you, your business? Is it going to help your community? That's what we're looking for, right?
That's right.
And just a couple of final thoughts. A lot of people are asking who's applying. So this gives you a little overview of who's applying. The top 3 sectors: tourism operators and vendors are coming up tops, then folks in the food services, and then services, which services are grouped together quite a bit. A reminder that the grant doesn't need to be paid back. That's important. A lot of times people see grant and they think loan because they're like, really, a grant? No, because grants don't generally happen, right? But this is these are extraordinary times. So, and then if you are a business and you have already applied for the grant and you recognize that you're now maybe eligible for more money, we have people behind the scenes who are reviewing that, so you don't have to go back and reapply. So that's about it. So maybe what I'll do is we can make this PowerPoint available for the resources up here, and I can also give Corey and Jocelyn and the team a little 2-pager of information after this that they're welcome to share with you. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so we can start answering some questions.
Awesome. Yeah, and anything you want, you can share with us. We'll get to the everyone who signed up. I know we have another 20 or so who didn't make it today who were signed up, so they might just want to get the information that way as well. So, all right, let's dive into some questions. I appreciate you guys going through the PowerPoint. I know you prefer the conversation. We'll do that part now here. For those of you who signed on maybe after I had said my initial hellos at the very beginning and wondering what the hell happened to Paul, my name is Corey Retterkopf. I am the Director of Policy and Stakeholder Relations at the Board of Trade, so I'll be taking over from here on out for the rest of the session, and you'll be hearing from me in the last 10 minutes over some other grant programs as well, so stay tuned for that. But so I've got a bunch of questions here I've been jotting down in the chat box and the Q&A as we went here. There's been a couple that came in around eligibility for businesses who are either new or who maybe have some challenges with that cash flow requirement. So I think you mentioned that it's a rolling 18 months. So we're looking at probably about August now, they had to be operational. On the cash flow piece, there's a thing saying that is a requirement for being cash flow positive. So in your last statement before February 2020. So if a business had a loss in 2019, so they had a bad year in that year, or I think there was a question where someone had to take a medical break. So for a few months, they weren't operating their sole proprietorship. What's the cash flow element look like for businesses?
Good question. Thanks, Corey. And I'll just jump in front of that, Morningstar, if that's okay.
Yes,
so we do review everybody's, wow, you spotlighted me. That's great. I need to stop looking at myself on the screen. All right, so in terms of cash flow, we do look at everybody's application in isolation. So we want to understand their specific situation. And if something comes up where maybe they were purposely closed in 2019 for major renovation, or like you said, a medical emergency, then we take that into account. And that's why we ask for 2018 as well. So that helps us understand really what's the impact of COVID. Again, this program is really geared at supporting the most gravest impacted businesses. And all we're trying to determine is, can the business sustain itself? And I make the analogy with when we train our adjudicators is that, can you pay the bills? Can you keep the lights on? Can you pay your staff, pay your rent? And if that's the case, then you're viable. I know that's a very simple way of looking at whether a business is liquid and viable, but what we're concerned of is that they weren't already on the edge, and it was just a matter of time, right? And this is what the government is wanting to support and invest in. I hope that answers the question. Yeah,
no, perfect. Yeah, so and I think the spirit seems to be trying to make sure that businesses are viable and that they have a path forward. Another question that came in.
That's right.
Was the employee size. So I know it's up to 149 employees. There's a couple of questions I saw around sole proprietors and then people who pay via dividend. So either they're so it's just Joe's Plumbing and Joe's the only employee, or it's a corporation, but they pay via dividends, so they don't technically have employees. How do we handle that?
That's right. That's fine. We obviously people can do that in terms of how they sort themselves for tax affairs, and that's no problem. And they're still considered to be self-employed for us, and that would be that one employee. So taking that example, they would have no employees, but themselves would be self-employed in that case, so they would be eligible. And the employer requirement has been lifted, right? So it can be 0 up to 149.
Okay, perfect. And one of the things I was chatting with somebody yesterday about supports for overhead. So you mentioned that it can now be used for overhead, so rent, lease, things, utilities, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Is there a percentage that should be used for that? 'Cause I know the thrust of this was a recovery plan. So are they allowed to, are businesses able to, if their biggest thing is, I've got my business sorted, I know what I want to do, it's just the overhead that's killing me. Is there a percentage they're allowed to use for overhead, or can they use the whole thing to cover equipment, leases and stuff that they're just sitting there idle right now?
Well, you raise a good point. We do want to see that there are some recovery items that really help towards ensuring their viability through pandemic, right? And so paying for expenses that have already incurred, obviously that's a genuine concern that people already have, because they may have tapped into some type of debt financing, or for God forsaken, used some of their savings, right? And we understand that's what's happened. And that's why the Minister of Finance, who was really integral in developing this program, is saying that we want to make sure that people can use funds for that. But again, like you mentioned, Corey, the focus really for the program is to see what can the businesses do, given the current state of emergency and pandemic ongoing through who knows, for the next few months at least. What can they do to really sort of pivot, right? So that's the focus that we have.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Great questions coming in. So keep putting them in the chat box and the Q&A. I think I said put them in both, so now I'm watching 4 windows here trying to catch them all. I got a question here from Amit. So make sure I capture this right, Amit. But Amit's an outbound tour operator. So obviously he wants to know whether he classifies as the tourism class, because I guess what they actually do in BC is plan the tours. The tours are all on cruises or in Europe or in Mexico. So the actual tourism isn't happening in BC. Does that impact it? And maybe building on that, what's a tourism business? I mean, if you're a restaurant in a tourist adjacent area, are you a tourism business? So is there a cutoff for that? But specifically for Amit there on if you're in the travel industry, unless you're doing travels in BC, is that still tourism?
I'll take it.
Good question.
Oh, yeah.
We only get good questions here in Burnaby, so yeah,
that's right. That's right. Well, I'm in Coquitlam, so we would have stopped already by about 10 minutes ago. I'm kidding. So with that question, tourism, again, we've really adjusted to making the definition a lot more broad. So for Amit's question, yes, he is a tourism business. It can be inbound or outbound, as long as you're supporting tourism. And you're a tourism business. It could be BC residents that are spending their money in BC for tourist destinations outside, right? I lost the second part of your question.
Answer that part of it, and that was really more, John. That was really more about if you're tourism adjacent, if you're tourist adjacent.
Yes.
So I think what we've done is we've realized, you think about all of the people within the province who are traveling. So before the changes, we were really looking at international travelers coming in and how did that affect your business? Well, the new definitions are allowing for us to say, hey, look, so I live in Victoria. A hair salon may not really think that they're a tourism business to begin with, but whoa, like during the summer, 60% of their revenue was actually from tourists who may have been coming from other places throughout BC to Victoria to check it out. So we've started thinking, recognizing that tourism in alignment with the federal government's understanding of tourism is what we're now going with. And so, yes, if you feel that your business was affected and you have less tourists coming to your business, then by definition, you would be a tourism business.
Right. Perfect. Yeah. And then thanks for that. The questions around, a couple here around doing your revenue calculation. So you mentioned that you have to have the 70% decline in March or April. So maybe first question on what does during March and April mean? Is it at any one point during that time or over a course of a period? And then for businesses that are maybe newer, so I got one question here about a business that was incorporated in the summer of 2019. So obviously they wouldn't have had the March or April to compare year over year. So how do we handle that?
So first question, and Corey, keeping me on the toes here with the double questions. So to answer your question, yeah, we apply the sort of similar auditing standard and GAAP in terms of how we review revenue. And so as an accountant by trade, obviously we would review for month to month or year over year. So if it's March 2019 versus March 2020, that's when we apply the 70% revenue loss criteria. Same thing with April. Now we understand that the original state of emergency started March 18th. So the impact of the original state of emergency really wasn't felt till April and May. And we just want to know, when did they feel it? When did they start to see the impact to revenues and sort of people under lockdown and everybody went, like all of us right now, I'm at home. So what did that mean for everybody? And we're just trying to measure that. And that's why the minister maintained that revenue loss criteria for March or April. So it's month over month.
Can I just quickly ask a follow-up question? And I think maybe the one thing that's missing is within March and April, it's a 30-day period, right? Is that
Are you asking me the question?
Yeah.
Well, it's month to month. So if it's March 2019 versus March 2020, and then April 2019 versus April 2020,
Yeah.
But there are some people that have come back and said, well, what about this week? Well, let's expand that period, because we want to see really the impact, because you can't use Tuesday and then say this Tuesday, because there could be other factors at play. But we want to see something like, and in anything that you do for audit or accounting, you just want to have a bit more of a broader focus to see really where's the impact, as opposed to something that's too limited or too narrow. But we're open to these suggestions. But the standard approach would be month to month or month over month. Corey had that. You had the second question about. Sorry, can you remind me of the second?
Can you remind me of the second question? Now I'm getting burned by my multiple level question. Morningstar's going to bail us out. What was it?
Yeah, the second question was around a business that had opened in July and wasn't able to show a March or April, but they are considered, because they're they've been open for 18
yes.
months.
Thank you, Morningstar, for saving me again. So obviously, because one of the key announcements that the minister made was to open this up for businesses that have been operation for at least 18 months, then the 70% revenue loss wouldn't be applicable. So what we're looking for there is the 30% loss for the months that apply. Because at that time, we've obviously the restrictions had been loosened, right? So it would be improper to use the 70%.
And it sounds, I'm heartened that the rules were relaxed and the eligibility was broadened, because that's always one of the things we work with government on is if we're trying to have an outcome and help business, let's just do that and not make it too much of a hassle to get to the help. Can you walk us through, or give us a little bit of detail? You both mentioned we'll look at this. People have come back and said this. What's the application process look like? Because often it's check a box, put a number in, but it sounds like it's a little bit more organic, or there's an opportunity to make the case on some of these things that somebody I would be a tourism business because of this, or can we look at this other area? It sounds you made it sound like it's more flexible. So how does a business actually, if they feel like they might need some of that flexibility, avail themselves of it?
So good question. I'll talk a little bit of a process, but I'll say in terms of how adjudication is undertaken, all of our team look at every application again in isolation, so that they understand really what's the particular situation, to understand, because not everybody's painted with the same brush, and we all know that folks sort of do business in unique ways, right? And so we're flexible in understanding exactly how that works, and we recognize that these are people that are living their dream, trying to build a business, right? And they're not accountants or bookkeepers, and sometimes they look at the criteria and like, I don't know where to start. What we wanted to make sure, and that we convey, at least through these calls and as adjudicators, is that the stuff that we're asking for already exists. right? If you file your taxes, you're current with your taxes, you have your notice of assessment. That's what we're looking for. Your financial statements that apply. If you're incorporated, your accountants are probably already preparing a balance sheet and income statement. If you have a statement of cash flows, that's key too. Payroll documentation. If you have payroll, you're filing monthly, quarterly, or whatever it is the case may be. And so you have your T4 summary of remuneration. That's what we're looking for. The one thing that we do ask for, and we need it for reviewing revenue loss, is this, the 24-month or 18-month revenue monthly revenue summary. And so our website has checklists and the folks can download. And there's really 5 really main things which already exist in my eyes as an accountant. Maybe not the revenue summary, but everything else is something that should already exist. So in terms of the steps, you go through our application process, and that's been streamlined to about 2 pages of questions that really speak around the criteria. And at the bottom, you upload the documentation that we ask for on our website. So if you go to our website, you download or review the checklist, and then you answer the questions on the application portal and upload those 5 pieces of documentation, then we're good to go. That's probably our biggest challenge, is making sure that folks understand what we're looking for and the information that we need. And if we get everything we need, really, it's a pretty fast workflow now. I know I can't paint all of our adjudicators with the same brush as myself as an accountant, but I can get through a file in 17 minutes. And and I want to make sure that I ground myself and manage the expectation. But we hope that we can get through a file in 3 hours, right? If we get everything we need, understanding that people still have some confusion and they're like, I don't know if this is what you want, and that's why the adjudicator will reach out and ask those kind of questions, right?
Okay, perfect. And I think that's good to hear, that it's not if you've missed one piece or it's not quite perfect, that they're just cut off. Then that the adjudicator might reach out and flesh that out.
I think that's
absolutely.
That's an important part of the conversation. Is I would say John and his team are almost like a white glove service. Like the human component of this is very high. We encourage people to get all of their information in, but should we have any questions, we do have a dedicated staff who's calling, reaching out, having like real conversations on the telephone, even not even just emails, like really trying to get the information and support people through the process.
Perfect. We've got about 10 minutes before we're gonna pivot and wrap up this section here. So I'm gonna try to blaze through some of the questions in the Q&A here. So the one that's coming up here is on the financial statement. So do those need to be audited financial statements prepared by a certified CPA or anything to qualify? Is there any requirements on that?
No.
They don't need to be audited. No, they don't need to be audited. But obviously we are checking that they make sense and they're reasonable. We've seen.
Don't write it on a napkin, is what John is saying.
Don't write it on a napkin, yeah.
Write it on a napkin and take a picture of it. Like they should thought through, right?
The accountant in me cringes if I see something on a napkin, but yeah, if it's something that someone pulls out of their accounting software, we'll take it. Obviously, we take applicants at their word, but yeah, if someone puts something together and it's on a napkin and it's a balance sheet and it doesn't even balance, the accountant in me just can't. I can't.
Well, yeah, and I think as long as people are using if they use Excel, they use Quick, whatever they're usually using, if they're just pulling that data, then that sounds like that's what we will do.
Absolutely. And so for the sole proprietors and the partnerships that are on the call, we will take your tax return, right? If you have a statement of business activities, your T2125, that's part of your T1 return, tax return, we'll take that. Don't feel like you have to build something. We definitely want to say that the things that we're asking for already exist. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
John, there's this one, I don't know what it is, so you might know this one. I got a question here specifically around, would a PD7A satisfy requirements for balance sheet income statement?
Well, a PD7A is a payroll summary document, right? So that would satisfy your payroll documentation requirement, as long as we can identify that you employed staff that are residents of BC. So what we have seen is some folks that are claiming staff that live in Alberta, and that's not who we're trying to support. We're trying to support BC residents, BC owners, and BC employees. or contracted staff, as long as they're residents of BC. So PD7A is for payroll. In terms of financials, it depends. If you're an incorporated business, you would have to file financial statements. We will take that. And if you're not incorporated, you would have your tax return.
Okay, perfect. There's a couple of questions that have come up around the service providers and the recovery plan. So just to clarify, if you can use a service provider, and to get the 2,000, they either need to be given to you by Small Business BC, or your own person can register with Small Business BC, and then they'll get paid that way. But there's also the option you can just write it yourself if you're comfortable, or you can use your own CPA or financial advisor to write it. But if they don't register with Small Business, then they'll just be billing you for that. Is that how it works?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And I would also just flag that within the application process, you are asked if you want to be matched with a service provider, or if you want to choose your own adventure, or do it on your own. So there is, within that application, you do branch off and have some choices.
Okay, perfect. So it's just a matter of whether you want the $2,000 grant to pay for it, is whether you're doing it yourself or you're going to get the help through Small Business.
Exactly.
Great question.
Because the service providers get paid through Small Business, so they need to be registered and they need to have their qualifications checked.
Exactly. Perfect.
Yeah.
And then to access that, there is a Small Business BC portal, I believe, for that. Or how would you find? You would get tied into that as part of your application, correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Great question from Roberta here. Just on, are we talking about that there's the threshold? So if she says, if I qualify for the $15,000 level, say, you just get the 15,000, or is it a gradient where it's 1, 2, 3, depending on where you fall in it? Or as soon as you cross the threshold, you get the full grant amount?
Well, it depends on what you're putting in your recovery plan. So your recovery plan needs to show how you're going to spend that $15,000 or more. I would almost suggest putting in more actions that go above your grant amount to show that you've got a lot of work to do, and that like if you just say, I'm going to, I qualify for $15,000, but I only am showing $7,000 in actions that I'm going to take, you're going to get $7,000, right? So you need to make sure that your recovery plan aligns with at least what your eligibility amount is or more.
Perfect. Okay, we're going to try to get a few more in here. There's a question here around, did I hear correctly that the grant fund can be applied to pay GST? I know we mentioned property taxes as part of overhead and rent. What about that one?
To pay GST. So GST you collect?
Yeah, maybe whoever asked the GST question, maybe throw in the chat box whether you're meaning to pay your GST remittances, or what you're trying to
So I have a suspicion I know the answer to that. I was an auditor. So you obviously GST you collect in trust on behalf of the Receiver General, and you collect that from your the end user or end supply of that whatever is being sold. So no, that's not what the recovery plan grant funders are for.
Perfect. Quick last couple here. So do nonprofits qualify, or charities?
Great question. We've been getting this a lot. Morningstar will speak to it, I'm sure. It's something that we're very, very passionate about, is that that is something that the minister is aware of, and we recognize that this program is geared towards for-profit businesses, and unfortunately they're not eligible, but the minister's heard it. We hear it every time we're on a call across the province, and we're bringing that feedback constantly to our exec team and up to the deputy minister and the minister himself, because they need to understand where the thing is. There are some supports out there that for not-for-profits, particularly if they're registered charities, but we recognize there are some not-for-profits that are not registered charities that are falling between some sort of crack. And if that means that, and I'll say this on behalf of Morningstar, the minister is looking at our program and understanding where are the gaps, and if there's a place that we can expand to support more, he's open to hearing this feedback. Right now, they're not eligible for our program, but there are other supports available. But we take this back, and we're hopeful that it opens up to that, because we do get that question a lot.
Perfect. I got a great question here from David on what's possible. So David's a home improvement contractor, so obviously trade shows are dead and they can't be doing those for their marketing efforts. So they want to use the grant for new marketing efforts to explore radio, print ads. Is that allowed?
Yes,
Yes.
sir. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. yeah, that's the exactly the kind of pivot stuff that we're talking about. So
That's right.
That's what we're looking for, absolutely. And then I'm going to be talking about the Launch Online grant in a minute.
Yes.
Here we have a question around, if I apply for the Launch Online grant, does that come out of the money I get from the recovery grant? Do they cancel each other out if I'm doing lots of online stuff as part of my pivot?
It doesn't, but I'm going to just give everybody a flag right now. So the Launch Online program was launched last week and there were 1,500 spots available.
Yeah.
And I know that by Friday of last week, it was half.
Yeah.
It had over 800 applications in.
Wow.
So I would say that, and I do know that the people who are running the program are planning on asking for more money to keep the program going next year. That being said, apply for it. If it's oversubscribed, you can use, like that application process is simpler because it's a very defined program. You can use the money from this grant program to do similar things as the Launch Online program, as long as it's part of your recovery plan, right? So I would say that they can be complementary. So you can use the Launch Online program and then you can work to develop that further with some of the money that you have in this program. Someone did ask a few days ago through our inbox how to navigate, and the suggestion is put that information into your recovery plan. Like put what you want to do as far as digital marketing and launching online goes into your recovery plan above and beyond your other things. So you can put more recovery plan actions that go above your threshold. So then if you apply for this other program and it is oversubscribed, you haven't lost that opportunity within this program.
Okay, good suggestion there. And then, so last question, and then we'll pivot to a few other pieces that I want to get to the team here or the audience here. But just, I know we've had a couple of questions on this and just want to really clarify the issue around the new businesses. So I've got a couple more come in here. So obviously they're brand new. They might not have the positive cash flow. They're brand new. They wouldn't have the year-over-year comparisons. So what is the kind of brass tacks on a new business that is eligible? It falls under the 18 months, but on the cash flow and the revenue decline piece.
Thanks for mentioning that part there, Corey, that they have to be at least 18 months. That criteria still stands. They have to be in operation for at least 18 months. Now, whether they can demonstrate positive cash flow, that's really dependent, because what's happened now is the company has sort of began operations during pandemic, which is not indicative of what's really the true market for them, right? Understanding that the demand is suppressed. So this has come up, especially for the companies that are 18 months or just on that sort of that edge of 18 months. So we're open to looking at business plans. So obviously people have developed business plans. They've asked for bank loans. They've asked for investors, and they developed a plan saying this is what the revenue stream will look like. And then pandemic hit, and that's not what the revenue stream turned out to be. We're open to looking at that. So again, every application will look in isolation. And so if you answer the application truthfully, and we will look at that and ask the question, so why is it negative cash flow, and why can you not demonstrate the 70% plus? Here's the reason why. And then here's my business plan that I developed when I asked for a bank loan or went out to the investment community to see who would be, or put in my own money, right? Those kind of things. So yeah, we'll look at those things to determine.
And that's essentially, you can upload that to your application. So when you're uploading all of those documents, just upload any additional, not heaps of additional information. We want to make it but if you have something that's going to supplement the understanding of the adjudicator, just upload it and give them that information so they're ready to roll.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, John and Morningstar, on taking the time to answer the questions. We'll get some details to all the audience and registrants around the program, the links, any documents you can share Morningstar with us. We'll get those out to the audience as well. So thank you very much for your time here. Before I wrap up, I know a few people had asked when they were signing up for whether we'd be talking about any other programs. So I'm going to quickly go over two, which are ones that are on our radar right now. That I wanted to flag with everybody. One of which is the one Morningstar just talked about, which is time is ticking very quickly. So I wanted to quickly run through the rent subsidy and the e-commerce grant. with the people on the line here. So if you don't know me, I talk very quickly. So don't worry, we'll get this done in the 10 minutes we're on. Because I'm speaking now, so this is me, and I am not one of these. So take everything I say as just suggestions and advice, but you can always contact me at the Board of Trade here for a more hands-on support. But the rent program I want to touch base on, because I've talked to a bunch of businesses that aren't using this because they think it's the old rent program, which is the one that happened in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. So this is not that one. This is a new rent subsidy, which is to support rent and mortgage payments that goes directly to the actual tenant of the business. It doesn't have to have the landlord component, which is what we were advocating for all summer long. So it's a new program that's launched on that. It's up to 65% of your rent, and if you have a net rent, that includes utilities, amenities, property taxes. And it's eligible to everybody, pretty much, and you have to be experiencing a decline, but there's no minimum. So it used to be, this one is as long as you have some revenue drop, you can get some rent subsidy. There's 6 periods we have the details for, running from September 27th to March 13th, but the program is legislated to go until June, and this is out of the federal government this time. So just quickly how it works. If you have a revenue declines of 70% or more during any of those periods, so they're 4-week periods, so September to October, October to November, if in one of those periods you have 70% or more declines, then you get the full 65%. If you have 50% to 69%, then there's a math equation where you would get a sliding scale down. So here's an example that if a catering company had 55% revenue decline, they would get a 46.25% rent subsidy. So it's going to help cover your overhead costs significantly in many cases. And then if you have anywhere between 1% and 49%, you would just take that and multiply it by 0.8 to get your subsidy amount. So if you're down 25% in November over last November, then you could get 20% of your rent covered through this program. And it's a direct subsidy going to you individually. And how do you compare that revenue? You're either going to do it month over month or year over year on the month we're talking about, or you can look at the Jan-Feb average revenues and compare that. So if you're looking at October and November, you'd be either looking at October and November against 2019, or you could be comparing that to Jan-Feb averages in 2020. If you're using the wage subsidy, you just have to use the same format you use for that. But yeah, for example, for the November to December period, you would compare either your revenues of November and December of 2020 against year over year from the year before, or you'd be comparing those against what your average revenue was in Jan-Feb of 2020. And that's what you're going to be looking for, that decline. And then once you have that decline amount, you pop it into the formulas, and then you'll have your rent support, subsidy there. And there's also a lockdown top up. So there's a flat 25% subsidy. So if you're at the full 65%, you can get up to 90% rent subsidy. If you have a public health order that is forcing you to close your doors or cutting at least 20 activities that accounted for at least 25% of your revenues being cut. So there's a requirement here, limits and reductions are not lockdowns. So this is a little bit less relevant in BC, where we haven't had as many lockdowns as, say, Ontario just went through. So yeah, like example, capacity in restaurant, you can only have 10 tables, not 20. That's not a lockdown. So that wouldn't require. But if you are in a sector where a public health order has ordered you to shut your doors, and that's something to consider. And then lastly, the Launch Online grant. This is the provincial grant to help pay for businesses to set up e-commerce sites. It covers 75% of those costs, up to $7,500 per business. But as Morningstar mentioned, it was a $12 million budget, which had about 1,600 applicants. I saw 600, so we were hearing it's already 800. So we're pretty very close to the capacity on that, but it's first come, first serve. So if you haven't got an application in and you're thinking about it, kind of get that in. And how it works is that you have to be a BC-based business with less than 149 employees, have generated sales in the previous year of 30,000, and you can't already have an online store. Or if you do, it's missing some key components that are outlined online. The trick here is you have to use a local BC service provider with this funding. Someone has to provide the service for you and build your e-commerce store. So I'll do a plug here for our website and our directory if you want to find a business that can help you with that. And you must start the program within 12 weeks. And you have to have tangible, repeatable goods, not services, which is unfortunate, but that's a criteria as well. And then really it covers all this stuff, getting photographers done for stock photos, doing the actual building the e-commerce store, search engine optimization, some advertising. All these pieces can be part of that your application to get the funding. And to apply, you just go online to launchonline.ca, and there you would put together your proposal and what you're going to be using the funds for, the estimates of the costs, and then you put that in. Later, you're going to need all this jazz at the bottom here around financial statements and PST registrations. But the main thing with the time crunch we're on right now would be to get a proposal in for the application if you're interested in that. So I told you I'd get that done before 10:30. So definitely look at those two programs if you haven't used them yet, or you aren't aware. Definitely the rent subsidy. Rent was a huge burden for a lot of businesses in the spring and summer. So this is a new program which is helping cover that. So we want to make sure that our members and our business community is aware of that service. So again, Morningstar, John, thank you so much for coming and taking the time to speak to our community here and answer some questions. Actually, we've got tons more questions than I was anticipating. So great job, everyone on the call. These only worked if you ask questions. So that was awesome. We'll follow up with everyone who registered with more details on the program and the handouts or pieces. I know there's a couple of questions I saw about translation. So there are some translations I saw online. So I'll make sure I share the links to you on those in case that's more helpful. And we'll get you all the details so you can go forward on that. And then lastly, I just want to mention a few upcoming events at the Board of Trade. For those of you who are interested in finding out what's coming up next. Next week on the 17th, next week is Chamber of Commerce Week. So it's a week to recognize the work of Chambers of Commerce across the province. So we have on the 17th a discussion with Minister Ravi Kahlon, the Minister of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation, to be discussing the ongoing pandemic, the provincial government's response, what comes next as they put together their first COVID budget. And then on the 18th, 4:30 in the evening or late afternoon, we have our Chamber of Commerce Week virtual members mixer. If you're sick of Zoom, if you can't wait to get off this one in 2 minutes and you're tired of Zoom, try out our networking mixers. These are a whole different format. It's as close to wandering around a networking room as I've come across online. So you definitely want to get a chance and check that one out. And then on the 25th, I know we have a lot of folks here who aren't necessarily part of our Board of Trade network or part of our membership. So you want to find out what the heck the Board of Trade is and why the Chamber of Commerce movement is so vitally important to the small business community. Come join us on Wednesday, the 25th at 9:30 for a member information session. You'll have a chance to connect with our CEO, a few of our key staff, and some other business professionals around what the Board of Trade is all about. But I really want to thank John and Morningstar for taking the time to come and chat with our members in our community on this program. Thank you everyone for signing up. We had a huge interest in this event, in this program, and it's great to see that it's been expanded. So we're hoping to get help. This session in our communications help businesses that need the help are able to understand and access it, and that's the point there. So again, thanks everyone for coming out, and we will follow up with anybody afterwards with more information. Stay safe out there. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll chat again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.